All right, so I'll get started. As Rachel mentioned, I'm Jalisa Gilmore. I'm the manager of equity and resilience programs at Groundwork USA. And so just to give a little bit of an overview of Groundwork USA, if you're not familiar with it, we are a national environmental nonprofit that basically is the national support organization to 20 plus people-centered community-based organizations from New York to Kansas to California. And so Groundwork Trust around the country, they work to address the history of environmental injustices while transforming urban neighborhoods. And so the network's mission really is to create communities that are healthy, green, and resilient. I should also share a lot of these communities are also environmental justice neighborhoods. So because of, history of injustice, they have polluting facilities in their neighborhoods, more air pollution, less amenities like green space and parks. And the work that Groundwork does is to, basically right those injustices by transforming the land. And so we primarily do this through 4 key areas. And so the first being what we historically done as a network is transforming neglected lands and waterways. Also increasing access to healthy food, whether that's through community gardens or an urban agricultural program. And then also all of our trusts, that's what we call the community-based organizations throughout the country, have a youth program. And so a lot of it focuses on environmental stewardship, but then there's also a workforce training component as well. And then more recently, we've really been focusing on increasing resilience to climate change and other environmental issues. And, that's really what we're going to talk about today. And so, as you all know, the climate is changing. It's a climate change in public health course, and we know that's affecting ecosystems, but also human systems. So there's more extreme weather events. So we know it's getting hotter. There's more storms, more floods, increased vector-borne diseases, depending where you are. There's wildfires. I think you all are very familiar with the consequences of climate change and the impacts on human health. So we don't need to spend a whole lot of time talking about that. But what I really want to talk about is the fact that we know the consequences of a changing climate aren't felt equally. More, indigenous communities, people of color, Black, Latino, low-income populations are feeling these impacts more than other communities. And also low-income populations, if I didn't say that, but they're on the front lines of this climate crisis. And like we know with, all the other environmental justice issues, that's not by accident. It's through, historic policies and practices in the US that's really led to the conditions that we're living in and working in today. And so through my work at Groundwork USA, we've been able to ask this question: is there a relationship between historic redlining and modern risk for heat and flooding? And so I'll talk a little bit about redlining just to, do a quick overview for those who may not be too familiar. And then I'll talk a little bit about our Climate Safe Neighborhoods program. And we've been able to answer this question, again, the relationship between historic redlining and climate impacts today through this 13-city partnership called the Climate Safe Neighborhoods program. And again, this is through not all of our trusts, but 13 of our trusts have been working towards this partnership, all in various stages of the program. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But first, I wanted to go into a little bit of redlining. And so I'm sure you're all familiar with kind of the practice of redlining. during the Great Depression, people are struggling, they don't have enough money. There was a low housing stock, homes were in default. So the government, as part of a series of New Deal programs, they decided to have this federally backed mortgage program, basically a policy to make lending easier and safer and promote wealth building, because we know home ownership is one of the most ways that people use to build wealth in this country. But for them to be able to, the federal government to be able to back these loans, they needed to figure out a system to determine risk. And so that they'll know like who can the bank give these loans to, who's more likely, who's going to be a more risky investment. And so they surveyed a bunch of American cities and they made these maps. And the maps were graded from A to D using green, blue, yellow, and red, basically saying, green, you're good to go. It's, there's no risk that you can lend there. And D being, this is too risky of an investment, don't lend there. And so basically the system was really just blatantly built on racism. And a lot of the green line neighborhoods were wealthier white people, and the red line neighborhoods were people of color and lower income populations. So this didn't cause segregation, but it really maintained that segregation that we saw in the country. People weren't able to get home loans to buy property in certain neighborhoods. People weren't able to get loans. You couldn't sell your house in the red line neighborhood, and you couldn't leave because other communities that were green lined didn't want you in that neighborhood if you were a person of color, because then you would bring down the property values. So that really led to a financial disinvestment in the neighborhoods. And so whether that was not upgrading the sewage infrastructure, or the housing stock wasn't invested in, or there was less parks and green space in these communities. And so the next slide I'm going to show is a digitized map of some redlining maps. I believe it's Elizabeth, New Jersey. Oh, no, that's after this. This is just basically highlighting, again, that this was explicitly basically based on race, of how they decided to make this system of determining risk. And you all can see that here. And this is another one, just respectable people, but homes are too near Negro area, D2. So being explicitly racist in this system, this federal government program. And so again, in the green lined areas, or even the B neighborhoods, which were, less risky, you'll see words in the descriptions like wooded, shade, rolling, like rolling hills, golf, all that stuff that you would think that you would want in the neighborhood that you're living in, stuff that can lead to better health outcomes. And then in the C and D neighborhoods, you see odors, manufacturing, paved, hot, surface. So really the things that are typically less desirable. And again, these are what people of color and low income populations had to deal with in their neighborhoods. And again, they weren't able to, leave. And so again, grade A, first grade was white, good housing stock. The second grade was white-ish, according to the US at the time, okay housing stock. And the third grade was poor housing stock, mixed race, immigrants. And then the D, fourth grade, was people of color, poor housing stock. And so now this is the slide with the digitized map. So I want you to keep your eye on any green polygon. And so that's tree canopy, that's impervious surfaces like pavement, concrete driveways, and that's surface temperature. And so now look at any red polygon. Again, tree canopy, impervious surfaces, which is a proxy for flooding, and then surface temperature. And so I know that went a little quick in the beginning, but basically the punchline is that as you're moving from grade A to D, the tree canopy cover decreases, the impervious surfaces increase again, which is really like a proxy for flooding or flood risk. And then the surface temperature increases. So these climate risks that we were talking about are, we're seeing that they are associated with redlining. And these are from the neighborhoods and the Climate Safe Neighborhoods Partnership. And so you might be asking, okay, what does this have to do with today? Redlining stopped, was outlawed in the 1960s, but as we know, 75% of those D-graded neighborhoods, the redline neighborhoods, are low to moderate income today. And 64% of those degraded areas are minority neighborhoods. So we're still feeling the impacts from a policy in the 1920s and 30s. And so now that I talked about all that, negative kind of stuff and, the US and how there's a history of systemic racism and stuff, what are we actually doing about it? Why does that matter? And so our Climate Safe Neighborhoods program partnership is really looking to not only address this, or not only to explore the relationship, but to actually work to address it in the communities. And so our Climate Safe Neighborhoods Partnership, I just want to share the goals with you, but I guess first I can say the big thing is we're looking at redlining and current climate vulnerabilities and really working with residents to make change in their communities. But more specifically, the goal is to explore and communicate the relationship between the climate crisis and institutionalized racism. And most of the time, the institutionalized racism that we're looking at is redlining, and the climate crisis that we're looking at is extreme heat and flooding. And the second goal is to build the capacity of residents to self-advocate for a more equitable distribution of resources. And these resources can be anything from money to trees to time to energy, whatever you need to make sure that your community is more resilient to climate impacts. And the third thing is to organize residents to intervene in policy and planning systems. And so the CSN partnership is a 3-year timeline. And so we're really looking to achieve all of these goals in 3 years, which is a really short amount of time. But, exploring climate change, systemic racism, and building the capacity of residents. And so just to give you a hopefully quick overview, in year 1, and bringing it back a little bit, Groundwork USA's role in this partnership is really we structure the trust who are in this partnership are on the ground in the communities doing the work, working with the residents. And then Groundwork USA, myself, we're working with their Climate Safe Neighborhoods coordinator. We're meeting with them weekly. We're giving them materials and all types of support they need to implement the CSN program in their communities. And so year 1 is really setting the stage for all the work that's going to be done over the next 3 years. So at first, we're really focusing on why our neighborhoods look the way they do, what is the needed change, and why hasn't it happened yet? And so this really looks like exploring the relationship between today's climate crisis and redlining, and then really also focusing on understanding the neighborhood. Like, who are my people? Who are the allies? How the local government works, the city council, how city budgets work. So really like understanding what's going on in your community, the history, but what's going on now. And then also really like working with the coordinators to build their skills because it's not just a research project, but it's an organizing project. So being able to build their skills to work with the community, to gain trust. And then this is done really through like coaching, assignments, and then we have like a cohort call where everyone talks and shares lessons. And then a last piece, which I'll talk about a little more right after this, is the maps and the dashboards that we use for climate safe neighborhoods. So that's really the key piece that we use throughout year one and throughout the whole program to really understand local context and to be able to talk about the issues in the community. And so year two is, so now that we all really have a better understanding of why the world or why our communities are the way they are, we start thinking about where we want to focus our energy. And so the climate safe neighborhoods coordinators will be working with residents to identify priorities. So what exactly is the change that they want to see in their community? Where is there an opportunity to intervene? And so sometimes this is done through a power analysis to understand who should be involved, who has decision-making power, and using that information to develop a plan for action. And really year two is like the end goal being formalizing an alliance of residents and other community stakeholders to make that change. And so in the third year, it's really focusing on doing the organizing work and executing that plan for change that you came up with year 2 and 3. And we really focus on making sure that the organizing is around residents being able to self-advocate for change, really be in the driver's seat. And so really the purpose of this last year is to make the change in the community that addresses the systems change that we want to happen, that were identified in year 1 and 2. And that looks really different in each community. And, you know, we show it as a year 1, year 2, year 3, but in reality, it's been like, you might do year 1 and it may be a little longer, then you go to year 2, and then you go back to what you were talking about in year 1, then you go to year 3. So it's really cyclical, and it's not as straightforward as a process as we would probably like it to be. And so, as I mentioned, a big part of this Climate Safe Neighborhoods program is the maps that we create. And so there's a couple of different maps that we use with this partnership. And the first being a dashboard. And so this is like a GIS dashboard that basically has a bunch of different layers of obviously like the redlining maps, the heat vulnerability index, again, impervious surface temperature, but also any other relevant like environmental data that we can get our hands on in the community and relevant like demographics for the community. And this is really like the tool that we use to explore the data and also identify the neighborhoods that we want to work in. We do kind of use like the history that the Groundwork Trust has with the neighborhoods, but also it's great to be able to see that, you know, oh, okay, well, not great, but like certain redline neighborhoods, okay, like we know from the HVI that these neighborhoods are the hottest, and, you know, that can help you identify maybe which neighborhood that you've worked with you would like to implement the Climate Safe Neighborhoods program. And so the dashboard is really meant to be like a tool, not public facing, but some people have used it as a public facing thing. But the story map, so the story map is meant to be like public facing for those who maybe don't feel comfortable exploring data on our GIS dashboard, just kind of like want the information right there. So the story map really tells the story of redlining, the specific community that the Groundwork Trust is working in, and then shows the maps that really connect current climate vulnerabilities to redlining, and then also shares a little bit about their plan and what they would like to do in the community. And then this third one, and I'm not sure why it's a GIF, I got this slide from someone else, but it's the transparencies that we use. And basically we print out the different like layers, whether it's the redlining maps or, you know, some other data, and it'll be like on the acetate, the clear acetate paper. And this is really good for when you're doing like community workshops and you want it to be more interactive, or if you're going door to door, or just somewhere where you can't access a computer to show all these, fancy GIS maps. So it's a nice interactive tool, and that's something we've also used through the program. And so why do we rely so heavily on maps with this climate safe neighborhoods program? And so there's a couple of reasons. And the first is it really helps build awareness and a deeper understanding of local issues. So we really feel that maps facilitate a pathway for stakeholders and residents to discuss qualitative but also quantitative data more seamlessly. So they might be like, oh, I just thought it was hot in my neighborhood, but they can see, oh yeah, my neighborhood's red, which would be hotter compared to that neighborhood over there that's like green. So it really helps, it's more visual, and it helps to kind of really connect that quantitative story, what people know, with that the qualitative stuff with the actual quantitative data. And the second reason is it's a neutral entry point to difficult conversations about race. Not everyone is comfortable talking about racial discrimination in our history. And so the maps really bring facts and provide an objective space for people to reflect. So the maps give an ability to show a complex and nuanced story at a single glance without placing blame on anyone. So it can be like, this is our collective situation. How did we get here? What are we going to do about it? And the third one is that it really makes the demands concrete. So we can turn these geospatial questions that we have into action with residents. And so it moves from this planning dynamic from where residents are informed or educated. Instead, they're provided the tools to get involved in the process of change making. And yeah, so I just want to share a couple of examples from the different trusts that are in the partnerships. So Groundwork Rhode Island, Groundwork Hudson Valley, and Groundwork Denver. And so Groundwork Denver, which is located in Denver, Colorado, they focus their climate safe neighborhoods in the neighborhoods of Globeville and Elyria, Swansea in northern Denver. And so basically this Globeville neighborhood is home to a Superfund site. It's home to a former lead smelting plant. There's a lot of people of color. And so Denver, a few years ago, passed this ballot 2A, and it was basically $40 million annually for climate resilience. But the process it wasn't clear how they were going to determine which neighborhoods in Denver got these funds, how the decisions were made, and I'll come back to that in a second, but that's the background before that. For that. So with the Climate Safe Neighborhoods Partnership, they had a group of residents that actually were using the dashboards and identified a discrepancy in tree canopy between the neighborhoods. So they realized that if you start in like the Globeville, Elyria, Swansea neighborhood, you have a tree canopy of, is it 1%? That says? Yes, 1%. I don't know, it's still like shocks me. And then if you go along the bus line to the wealthier neighborhood, all the way to the end about where the bus no longer goes, you see a tree canopy of 24%. So that really helped them kind of have a goal for what they wanted to show, like, look, we have a 1% tree canopy, but this neighborhood has a 24% tree canopy. So they were able to make the demands concrete, and they said, we want 10,000 trees over 10 years. And it really gave them a say in the decision-making process. And, it wasn't like they just came up with a number out of nowhere. They showed the facts and how this discrepancy is between the two neighborhoods. And so I just thought that was a really great use of the maps. And so back to that ballot 2A process that they had through the work of Groundwork Denver, they had some women called they were promotoras in the neighborhood, and they actually got on the committee that was making decisions for the ballot 2A program. Okay, so next is Groundwork Hudson Valley, which is located in Yonkers, New York. It's about 20-25 minutes north of New York City. And they've been known for being the second hilliest city in the US after San Francisco. At least that's the stat they always share. It is very hilly. But anyway, the community was known for like having a lot of historic fluvial flooding in the neighborhood. You know, they're bordered by the Hudson River, and then the Sawmill Creek. And so basically the Army Corps of Engineers did a lot of work to address the fluvial flooding, the riverine flooding, but not so much for the fluvial flooding. And so in Yonkers, the southwest part of Yonkers was redlined, and some areas have a separate sewer system, but the areas that Groundwork Hudson Valley were focusing on for their climate safe neighborhood partnership still had a combined sewer system. So basically, the stormwater runoff and the wastewater were all in the same system. So when they had really heavy flooding, sometimes, you know, the system would overflow, and then that would be a combined sewer overflow. And basically the stormwater and the wastewater, you know, would all just get into the community, and they would experience a lot of flooding. And obviously with it being wastewater, there's a lot of potential impacts on, you know, health and worrying about disease and all of that stuff. And so Groundwork Hudson Valley did a lot of organizing through their climate safe neighborhoods partnership. And this map here is actually from a partnership that they had with the New School in New York City that just showed like some of the flooding simulation that the city didn't even realize was flooding at the time. And then they realized after they'd been flooded twice. And I think that was the summer of 2020, or 2021. The last summer was 2022. But anyway, the thing is, Groundwork Hudson Valley ended up partnering with the Municipal Housing Authority and West Hab, which is a nonprofit affordable housing nonprofit, basically to do a feasibility study for green infrastructure for their most vulnerable properties that they could see through their climate safe neighborhoods program that it was vulnerable. And so now they're in the process of working directly with residents to talk about what they actually want, like shade structures, gardens, green infrastructure, trees, what they want in their community to not only help with the flooding, but help with the heat as well. And so that's a really, really big partnership, really exciting. And I was there last week, and this is actually a newly installed rain garden right next to one of the residents' homes that was experiencing basement flooding. And if you see in the top right, there's a hill right there. So they were getting a lot of flooding. And this was actually done through their Green Team, which is their youth program. So they, you know, they did all this themselves, and they were really excited to talk about it. And I think they just did it like late summer, early fall. But yeah, so that's really nice to see. And this is still all ongoing. Yeah, and so, oh, I clicked on a link by accident. I was like, what just happened? Okay, and the last one now is Groundwork Rhode Island, which is in Pawtucket and Central Falls, Rhode Island. And so basically prior to Groundwork Rhode Island's work with Climate Safe Neighborhoods program, the cities of Pawtucket and Central Falls, they didn't have an equity focused strategy for their urban forestry program. So basically, trees were planted on a first come, first served basis, and wealthier English language proficient residents were getting the most trees. So using the maps and talking with residents and, organizing, they were able to actually get the city to change over their system to using a heat vulnerability index and the EJ screen and placing the trees. So now it's, they prioritize more vulnerable neighborhoods, and they also got all the materials translated into Spanish. So now the application is in Spanish. When they announce anything about the program, it's in Spanish. So they really transitioned from a program that was just like, whoever wants trees gets trees, to actually putting the trees where they're needed and making sure that everyone has access to the resources that are available by making sure it's in the language of residents. And yeah, with that, I just want to say there's no single 100% solution, but we believe a lot of 1% solutions can really help to mitigate some of these climate impacts. And then the other thing is like mess up the system. We really want to have systems change. We want to push residents to intervene and policy making processes, master planning processes, to really make change. And then the third thing is like in the long term, really invest in communities so that the residents are in the driver's seat, that they can, have the tools and the resources and the confidence to make well-informed and wise decisions for what they want to see in their communities. And definitely encourage you to check out the different Groundwork Trust websites. They have a lot of information and they're all doing really great work. So thank you.
Thank you. That was, yay, super awesome. Thank you.